Professor Cobb, what I was struck by in that exchange was the ease, the comfort, and I've seen this my entire life, the ease with which white people, especially white men Donald Trump's age, will very comfortably and easily say racist things to another white man with the assumption that that is a completely acceptable thing to say.
Sure. And I think that what Trump has done, and we've seen this from the outset, is that he's appealed to people who have really just kind of had a vicarious catharsis through him. The ability to say things they've wanted to say in public that can only be said and echoed among like-minded people. And that started from the moment he referred to Mexicans as rapists on the first day of his presidential campaign. And so there is a linear connection from that first statement to the statement now that surrounded by a group of Black people, you won't be safe in America, or telling people that he wants to reduce the percentage of minorities who are in suburbs, and using language of housing projects and so on. And so I think that while we looked at this initially and were aghast and thought that the old rules of politics would apply, that this would be kind of fatal to a political campaign, what we did not anticipate was the extent to which people have been yearning to just kind of go to their window and shout those kinds of things out loud to the public. And he allowed people to do that through him.
Yeah, Zerlina, what I've seen from the start with Donald Trump as a campaigner is that he has one of the strongest connections you can have with the kind of voter who supports him, which is he hates the people who they hate. They have shared hatreds, and that is as powerful a connection as people like that can have.
Absolutely, Lawrence. And it reminds me of the week during the campaign where he was having a lot of rallies in 2016. In Chicago was an infamous rally where there was a lot of protesters, and he was, hearkening back to an ugly period in American history in terms of his rhetoric. And I remember thinking at the time, there were a lot of colleagues of mine on Hillary's campaign thinking about the fact that he was normalizing overt expressions of racism again, that he was making it okay, to Dr. Cobb's point, that people now felt fine with expressing overt bigotry out loud and in public with no threat that they would be held accountable for that behavior at all. And that's what Donald Trump has done. It has dangerous consequences. It's not just impolite words. As we've seen very recently, it can lead to real world violence. And so that's why it's so important for us all to call it out every time.